All right, welcome back to the finals of the Legacy Tour Huntsville. We are here with James Hess playing Elves and Scott Taylor playing Death and Taxes. We have the little green men versus the little white men. Sorry. James Hess, first seed on the play, starts off with a Deathrite Shaman. Scott Taylor answers with an Aether Vial. We will get started. Elves generally a pretty difficult matchup for Death and Taxes. Um, Flooding the board, really good thing to do. Really difficult thing to deal with. Looks like a Swords to Plowshares and an Umezawa's Jeet in hand for Scott. Two really good cards in the matchup. We will see if that will be enough for Scott to take the game, or if James Hess will move on to be a three-time Legacy Tour champion. It is definitely a difficult matchup for Taxes. I'll say that much. Elvish Visionary, turn two for James. There's a fetch land if he wants to use that for the Deathrite Shaman. So he will just pass the turn back. Scott Taylor will activate Aether Vial on 0. He will not put in his Memnites. They will stay in his hand. No Ornithopters joining the battlefield at the end of James' turn. Looks like a Wasteland hanging out in Scott's hand, so that could go after the Bayou if he so chooses. Instead, it will just be Horizon Canopy and Stoneforge Mystic. Scott will find a Batter Skull and pass the turn back. And if James doesn't just win the game this turn, Scott will be in an okay spot. He'll be able to put in the Batter Skull, I guess, on James's next turn. And then after that, assuming he has the lands for it on the next two turns, he'll be able to play and equip the Jeet. And then at that point, he'll be in a really good spot. Probably can win the game from there. Fortunately, that requires James to not win the game for two turns in a row. And Glimpse of Nature is what he will cast, so that looks kind of unlikely. Virtual Ranger will draw a card. Kind of difficult to see what the cards in James's hand are. See a Dryad Arbor. I don't know if I saw a Guy's Cradle earlier, if I'm just going crazy. Looks unlikely, as that is a Windswept Heath. Will be sacrificed. Two mana. 3 mana is a Reclamation Sage. Snipes the Aether Vial. Not the end of the world. I don't know how much Scott was planning on doing with that. And Scott will be able to untap. He did not die last turn. That was step one. Caracas is the land. Swords will go after the Birchlow Rangers. That would produce 4 mana on James's turn, so I don't mind that at all. We'll cast a Bouncy Land Guy. I think that's the Quirion Ranger we decided. And a Sylvan Library. Could do the Bouncy Land shenanigans. I think there's one fetch land in the graveyard for Deathrite Shaman. I'll opt not to. Simply pass the turn back. So Scott's option here is either putting in Batterskull or putting in the Jeet, I think. If he has the land to play next turn, I'd be surprised if he didn't just put in Batterskull. Otherwise, putting in the Jeet is the more reliable option. The other possibility is the Wasteland here, going after either Dryad Arbor or the Bayou. We'll see what Scott decides to do. Play the Wasteland, take a point of damage, throw the Jeet on Stoneforge. I expect the Stoneforge will just go to town. He'll port the Dryad Arbor, it looks like. So the Dryad Arbor would otherwise be able to block Stoneforge and then be returned to hand from Queer Ranger. That would prevent Scott from getting any Jeet triggers. Instead, the Reclamation Sage will kill Stoneforge Mystic. James will return the Dryad Arbor to hand before Queer Ranger dies. And Scott will simply pass the turn back. James will use his Sylvan Library, look at the top three, then get a super great look at what those are. See what he decides to do. Nearby players are chanting pay 8 at him. Looks like it might actually just work, as I think that was what he just did. Oh, we're doing it, boys. The outside influence got there. He paid a million life. Green Suns for 1. Could get a Heritage Druid, so Scott kills the Visionary before he'd be able to activate it. James with a land drop to make and 2 mana in the form of a Deathrite Shaman and a land. Nattle Sentinel will be his play. Very good with Heritage Druid and a Quirion Ranger. And a Dryad Arbor and a passing of the turn. Sword of Fire and Ice will be Scott's draw. I believe with the Batter Skull in hand, not really what he's looking for there. Looks like a Sarah Avenger will join the battlefield. Will then be equipped with the Jeet, and the turn will go back to James. Players once again chanting pay 8. We'll see if our message will reach James once again. I believe that is unfortunately considered outside influence. However, the judge has also joined in and is chanting pay 8 at James Hess. By the way, I'm lying, they're not actually doing that. And it will not work. I shouldn't have said it. No, we've cursed him. He'll only draw 1. Looks like Deathrite Shaman, what he found. 3 mana off of the Heritage Druid. 3 more mana off of the lands. And return a land to untap the Dryad Arbor. And that will be a Craterhoof attacking for a lot, and Scott will die. Game 1 looking salvageable for a little bit for Scott. Unfortunately, was not able to be won. We will turn to the sideboards to see what these players have. For Scott Taylor, 2 Containment Priest, 2 Spirit of the Labyrinth, 3 Aethersworn Canonist, 2 Pithing Needle, 1 Seal of Cleansing, 3 Rest in Peace, 1 Path to Exile, and 1 Council's Judgment. Of these, could potentially see the Path Mages come in, although there is a basic in James's deck, 2 of them in fact. Ramping the Elves deck, never really what you want to be doing. Containment Priest could potentially come in, shuts off Green Sun Zenith and Natural Order. Spirit of the Labyrinth could come in as well, shuts off the, what's the card called? Glimpse of Nature. Either one Canonist uh, often comes in just to try to slow the Elves deck down, force them to only play 1 spell a turn. I can slow down their game plan kind of a lot. Pithing Needle could potentially come in as well. That turns off the um, Quirion Ranger and the Wirewood Symbiote as bouncing creatures and lands and help the Elves deck get a lot of additional value. Out of James, 2 Pithing Needle, 1 Scavenging Ooze, 1 Progenitus, 1 Rurik Thar, 1 Surgical Extraction, 1 Thoughtseize, 4 Cabal Therapy, and 4 Abrupt Decay. Out of these, could potentially see the Pithing Needle. As mentioned in an earlier match, the Death and Taxes deck has a lot of activated abilities it likes to rely on. Things like Almost Always Jeet, Rishadan Port, even potentially Wasteland could be names for that Pithing Needle. Progenitus could also come in. It's a good natural order target that Death and Taxes can't really do anything about. If that hits the field, it's often just game over. The Decays could come in as well, at least some number of them. They blow up the equipment, the It Was Always Jeet and the Sword of Fire and Ice out of Death and Taxes. The discard could potentially come in some number as well if Scott plays a Stoneforge Mystic and gets an equipment. That's an easy name for a Cabal Therapy. Don't think it's super likely though. Death and Taxes is kind of a fair grindy deck, so probably not really where James wants to be playing discard spells with him. Players will go ahead and finish sideboarding. Get back into game number 2 of this finals match at Legacy Tour Huntsville. Very nice Elvis Visionary playmat James Hess has. I think this is like the 3rd time that the left player has had a playmat and the other one hasn't. I don't know if there's some kind of theme going on there or not. Potentially a conspiracy. This is the finals. Final match for the top 8. The winner of this will receive an invite to the Legacy Tour Invitational. Second place will receive 4 points towards that. Looks like the Council's Judgment came in out of Taylor Scott's Death and Taxes. James not liking what he sees, takes a mulligan. He will be on the draw this game. I think I also saw an Ethersworn Canonist in the opener. Looks not too bad. Maybe also an Aether Vial and a Thalia and a Wasteland. Those all look like good cards. This is game two. James Hess won game number one. Elves deck is up a game. I see I think it's a Quirion Ranger and a Gaia's card I can make out in James's hand. It's really difficult because it's foil. All those cards are really shiny, and they all have different arts than what most players have. It looks like James is still not satisfied. He will go down to 5. Looks like that might have been another turn 1 Gaia's Cradle pass out of the Elves deck. We saw that in an earlier game. See a Wirewood Symbiote, at least one land, and some other green cards in James's hand. In my professional opinion, that seems generally pretty serviceable. We'll see momentarily if James is satisfied or if he wants to go down to 4 cards. So you might actually be doing some math. We might just have a combo on our hands. No, that will not do it either. James will go down to 4 cards. Brutal mulligan. Alright, if there's any game Death and Taxes can win against an Elves deck, a mulligan to 4 has to be it, right? See if we can try to see any of those cards. Gives a thumbs up. Takes a scry. Puts it on the bottom. Not sure what he has in hand, but apparently it's good enough to keep. Wasteland into an Aether Vial. Another familiar start out of Death and Taxes. James will play a fetch land and a Quirion Ranger. Turn goes back to Taylor Scott. Plains will be the land for turn. He'll play a Thalia. Makes Glimpse of Nature and Natural Order a lot harder to cast. I think I see a Wirewood Symbiote and then either another Wirewood or another bird or Quirion Ranger rather. Sorry. in the hand for James. He will produce a green and then bounce the forest to make a second. Play an Elvish Visionary. Draw a card and pass the turn back. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get to see what that card was. Dahlia will get into the red zone. 2. Phyrexian Evoker. Turn off, I'm assuming, the Quirion Ranger. And an Aethersworn Canonist and a Wasteland will end Scott's turn. It's looking rather unfortunate for James now. Stuck on one land, I think. Probably needs to try to find an answer to this Aethersworn Canonist if he wants to make anything really happen. He does have a second land. Unfortunately, he can't use that to make a to search for a bayou, unless he just wants to get wastelanded a lot. Scott already has 2 on the battlefield. James will just pass the turn back. Taylor ticks the vial up to 3. He's a Containment Priest as well. Apologies for Taylor Scott. Aethersword Canonist attacking is interesting. The vial on 3 and the Aethersword Canonist attacking signifies that it's probably a Flickerwisp in Taylor's hand. Would make blocking very dangerous for James. Turn goes back. We'll see if James can make anything happen this turn. So he will sacrifice that to Windswept Heath. See if he searches for a basic forest or for a bayou. Or even for the Dryad Arbor. It will be the forest. There'll be another Elvish Visionary. We'll draw a card and simply pass the turn back. And 2 creatures will come in for 4 once again. James will block the Aethersworn Canonist and bounce it to his hand. Not 100% sure what the Phyrexian Revoker is naming then. That was my assumption. Could be on the Deathrite Shaman or on even Heritage Druid, because unlike Pithing Needle, a Revoker will stop the Heritage Druid from producing mana. Or on the Symbiote, it could be naming as well. The Stoneforge will find an Umezawa's Jeet. Visionary will be replayed by James. Draw another card. Unfortunately, that Aethersworn Canonist means that he will simply have to pass the turn back. Unless he wants to attack. But that seems kind of bad with a 1-2 Stoneforge on the other side of the table. get in once again. James will prevent 2 of that damage with a block and a bounce. Taylor will simply pass the turn back. I expect probably an equipment will come in at the end of James's turn. Very full hand of cards for James. Doesn't look like he's still found a 3rd land yet. Simply replay that Elvish Visionary and pass the turn. That would be the Umezawa's Jeet joining the table. James will discard an Abrupt Decay. I expect that probably means he has multiples if he's discarding one of them. I expect getting rid of that Aethersworn Canonist will be a high priority. Could also just have a Reclamation Sage in hand that he can't quite cast yet. That would also be an answer to the Canonist. Taylor doesn't equip the Jeet before combat. James could simply block the equipped creature and then bounce the creature that is blocking to deny the counters. Instead, Taylor has a Swords in hand that I expect will probably go after that Wirewood Symbiote at some point, either on his turn or on James's. We'll see if James even wants to do the block bounce trick again, or if he just wants to take that 4 damage. Only issue with blocking and bouncing is that that ties up James's next turn. So I think James will opt to just take the 4 damage. He'll proceed to his turn. Okay, Windswept Heath will be a land for James. And a Heritage Druid. And a passing of the turn for James. Potentially next turn we could have things happening. The Swords will go after the Wirewood Symbiote. The difficult thing about this is that now Taylor can equip the Jeet and then attack and deal damage or get Jeet counters on it. And at that point, James's entire board is in desperate peril. Jeet does go on the Thalia. And now blocking is even more difficult, as not only is the Aether Vial still on 3 representing a potential Flicker Wisp, the Thalia will get first strike damage in before all the other creatures, and then those Jeet counters can start wreaking havoc even on the blocking creatures. So James throws both visionaries at the Aethersworn Canonists, and that means that Taylor has to either use the Flicker Wisp or the one of the G counters on one of those visionaries if he wants the canonists to survive. And at that point, James is either allowed to untap with a Heritage Druid or a Quirion Ranger, both of which can be very powerful options for his Elves deck to make things happen. 3/4 mana and an Abrupt Decay on the Umezawa's Jeet. I'll go after the Thalia, it looks like. Damage will happen. So the Canonist and the Visionaries will die. And now James will be allowed to untap with a lot of cards in hand. Taylor plays a Mother of Runes and passes the turn. It seems like the best chance that James has to really make something happen. Both Thalia and Aethersworn Canonist gone. I believe that may have been a glimpse of nature. Maybe a Nettle Sentinel and a Quirion Ranger, drawing 2 cards each. Well, 1 card each, sorry. Two more mana floating, I believe, for James Hess. Guy's create a little land for turn. Produce 4 mana in addition to the, I think, 2 left. 6. Will be a natural order. Oh, fine Progenitus. That's pretty unfortunate for Taylor Scott. Although actually, I believe he still has that Council's Judgment in the opener. Or from the opener, rather. So if he finds one more white source, he does actually have an answer to that Progenitus in hand. Two Pithing Needles join the table. I think that's naming Aetherile and Umezawa's Jeet each. Plains will be the draw for turn. That is very fortunate. Now Taylor is able to both Council's Judgment, the Progenitus, as well as Wasteland, the Gaia's Cradle. Looks like first he wants to swing for 2 with that Phyrexian Revoker. That will be Taylor's turn. Looks like James will concede this game. A hard-fought game for death and taxes results in a victory after James mulliganed to 4 and was on the draw. Now we will go back to James for game 3. We will see if Taylor Scott can pull off one more win to be the Legacy Tour Huntsville champion, or if James Hess will once again claim that title and be a 3-time Legacy Tour Huntsville champion. Looks like neither player opting to change their sideboard strategies after that second game. So our players will get started on game 3, both with 7s. James will start us off with a fetch land. We'll see where he wants to go after that. Bayou will be the land he finds. Not afraid of that wasteland at all. And a Quirion Ranger. Taylor will have a turn 1 Aether Vial once again. We will return to James. See if he has the turn 2. Second might be a green since for 0 as for James. He has, I believe, 1 Dryad Arbor in hand, but there is 1 more in the deck if he wants to go search for that. And that will be the case, it looks like. See if he wants to play the other Dryad Arbor as his land for turn. And he will opt to do so. And then get in for 1 with his Quirion Ranger. Man, a Pyroclasm would be really good here. Instead, a Wasteland, a Rishdon Port, a couple of Mother of Runes, and a Sarah Avenger, and maybe even the Umezawa's Jeet are what Taylor has in hand. Surge will go after that Quirion Ranger. Before it dies, James will bounce the Bayou back to his hand. Wasteland will take care of one of the Dryad Arbors. And the turn will go back to James. And taps once again with only 1 land in play. Last time he had a creature too. This time his land and creature are just the same. Will be another Quirion Ranger. Bayou will be replayed. James will tap the Bayou for a little mana. Replay it and Abrupt Decay. No, sorry, to untap the Dryad Arbor. And use that mana to Abrupt Decay the Aether Vial. I'll do a lot to slow down Scott as he does not have another white source in hand. Otherwise, there could be a Sarah Avenger on the board this turn. Instead, it's just the Jeet. Could potentially equip that to the Mother of Runes next turn and play out another one if he finds another white source. Like One So Teeth will be the land for terms for James. It almost looked like the video froze for a second, but the players were just very still. I think another Wasteland was the draw for Taylor. Rishdon Ports. The Mother will be equipped. I think it's the Summoning Sick Mother. So he's not interested in swinging with it this turn. James has the block with Dryad Arbor and then bounce it back into your hand play available, which means that Mother of Runes wouldn't have actually dealt damage. By playing out the second one, this means that James can then give it protection from green and swing in the next turn and guarantee that it connects. Back to James's turn. Take a natural order and a land. Two of the cards in James's hand. Bayou will hit the field. And 3 mana. And then untap the Dryad Arbor for a 4th. Could potentially see a natural order here. Taylor doesn't have the Council's Judgment and White Source once again, then this could potentially be the end of the game if he finds that Progenitus once again. It will be the natural order sacrificing the Dryad Arbor that James decides. They're making a slightly anguished look with his hands. Wasteland and Sarah Avenger, the cards in hand. Not going to do it for Death and Taxes. Looks like a Swords may have been the draw. Unfortunately, not a card that kills a Progenitus. Mother will get in for 1. Pro green, unblockable. Wasteland will go after the Bayou. James will bounce it with the Quirion Ranger. Progenitus gets in for 10. Cabal Therapy from James. Almost certainly not going to hit. Taylor triumphantly swords the Plowshares, the Quirion Ranger. Fortunately, he did not do so before he tried to wasteland the Bayou last turn. Sarah Avenger is the revealed card. Could potentially sacrifice Progenitus if he wants to discard it. It's probably not the best line of play. Path to Exile, the draw for Taylor Scott. He will come in, gain some Umezawa's Jeet counters, gain 2 life to survive another hit from Progenitus. And now at this point, with that Path to Exile, he could Path to Exile a Mother of Ruins to get the 2nd white source he needs to potentially top deck the Council's Judgment. We'll see if he opts to take that line. Progenitus knocks him down to 2. And he will Path to Exile the Mother of Runes, I believe on James's end step. So now Taylor can swing in with Mother of Runes once again and get 2 more Jeet counters, which represents a total of 10 life he could gain to put himself up to 12, which means he has 2 turns now to draw that Council's Judgment before he dies to Progenitus. Taylor Scott just barely hanging on there. Moment of truth. He draws a card. Doesn't even look at it yet. This man has way more constitution than I do. He gets in for one whole damage. It's a Stoneforge Mystic. Well, probably still cast it. Or maybe not. He could cast it to pull one more card out of his deck. Opts instead to cast a Sarah Avenger. Janice gets in for 10. Taylor Scott gains 10 life. The other threat here is that James decides to do anything other than simply passing the turn back, and Taylor being at 2 life is in a rather bad place to deal with whatever else James decides he wants to do. An Elvish Visionary, what he decides to go with. Goes to the graveyard, flashing back Ichabod Therapy, which misses. Scott draws one more card, slams down a Flicker Wisp. That will not do it. James Hess wins game number 3 and is now a 3-time Legacy Tour winner with the Little Green Elves. Very good games between these two players. Very well played on both sides. Big congratulations to James. Thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us. My name is Christopher Cusera. This is the Legacy Tour Huntsville put on by MTG Training Grounds. This has been a day full of Legacy. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you will join us again next time.